My presentation is on Browning's One Day in Jozefow, the initiation to mass murder. Some background is prior to Jozefow and other events where mass murder occurred, as of March 1942, 75 to 80% of Jewish people were still alive. 11 months later, the percentages were flipped, with 75 to 80% of Jewish people being murdered and only 20 to 25% still being alive. The center of this mass murder was in Poland. It was quick and violent. After 2.5 years of hardship had occurred of Jewish people enduring persecution, but then only 11 months later, all that remained were labor camps and ghettos. Much of the manpower that Germany used for the mass murder that occurred in Jozefow was not directly provided by the Nazi regime. It had to be pulled from two other main sources. The first source were Ukrainian, Lithuanians, and Latvians who were recruited out of the prisoner of war camps and were trained. These men were organized into mobile units and became ghetto clearers. The second source, many battalions of order police that were stationed in the general government. While Germany didn't directly provide the manpower through soldiers who were already fighting for the Nazi regime, some Germans ended up choosing to volunteer for the order police in order to avoid being drafted to the army. The demographics of the Reserve Police Battalion 101. The Reserve Police Battalion 101 was from Hamburg and was directly assigned to Jozefow. This battalion was commanded by Major Wilhelm Trapp. There were two captains who were young men in their 20s. There were 32 NCOs, 22 were Nazi party members, and 7 were in the SS. Majority of the men were from Hamburg. 60% were in the working class, 35% were in the lower middle class, and only 3 were middle-class professionals. Very few were economically independent, and none had a high-level education. How Jozefow began. The Reserve Police Battalion 101 departed from Hamburg on June 20th, 1942. They were originally stationed in Belgorod. On July 11th, they were given their order for their first major action. Their assignment was the mass murder of 1,800 Jewish people living in Jozefow. They were assigned to select out all of the young Jewish males in Jozefow and send them to a work camp. The remaining 1,500 Jewish people, who were not young men, the women, children, and elderly of the town, were to be shot on spot. On July 12th, Major Trapp told his officers what their assignment was. The day of Jozefow. The morning of, Major Trapp and his men rode to Jozefow. Upon arrival, Trapp held back tears as he told his men that their assignment was to murder the women and children in Jozefow. One reserve lieutenant said he could not kill innocent women and children and requested a different assignment. His request was approved, and he was given the task of accompanying the work Jews to Lublin. Major Trapp told his men if they did not feel up to the task, they were allowed to step out and be given a different task. The men who stepped out. One man stepped out first alone. Following him, 10 to 12 others stepped out as well. They were told to await a further assignment. The men who refused to complete this assignment did receive consequences. The first man was sent on almost every partisan action, but was not required to complete Jew hunts. Other men were given excessive tours, but for the most part, those who said no were not asked to participate in killing Jewish people. While their assignments were modified, consequences came in the form of reputation amongst other men in their battalions. They were seen as lesser and often ridiculed for not being strong enough men. The mass murder at Jozefow. Major Trapp was not seen at the shooting site and was reported as weeping throughout the day over the assignment. Many of the men were unable to kill the infants. The Jewish women, children, and elderly were held in the marketplace while they brought Jews in groups to the forest to lay them down in a line and murder them. Many of the men were intentionally firing past their victims, and many men requested to leave and were unable to kill any Jewish people. One policeman recognized a German Jew and her daughter and had to request to leave. After Jozefow, despite the many men who refused to complete the assignment, every Jewish person in Jozefow was murdered. The Reserve Police Battalion 101 was transferred to the northern part of the Lublin district after Jozefow. It became their responsibility to ensure the surrounding region was Judenfrei. Once a ghetto had been cleared, Juden-Jagden or Jew hunts were conducted to track down Jews who had fled during the first roundups. If they were caught, they were shot on the spot. The results of Jozefow and other events throughout the next year. By the end of the year, there was scarcely a Jew alive in the northern Lublin district. The men who were directly related to Jozefow set the tone for how they impacted each assignment after that by their decision at Jozefow. Those who requested to not shoot were excluded from further killing actions. Those who did shoot were thought to have been getting used to shooting, and it made it easier for them in future events. For the discussion questions, there are 3. For the first one, do you think the men within the Reserve Police Battalion 101 were influenced by the fact their childhood years predated Nazi beliefs? Could this be why a few of them were unable to go through with the heinous action they were assigned? Why or why not? For the second, for the men who did not challenge their assignment and did it without question or without stepping out, why do you think they did this? Are they more evil than those who said no and requested to not shoot? For the third, personally for me, I was surprised Major Trapp allowed any men to opt out so easily without many consequences. At the end of the chapter, it says, I know of no other case in which a commander so openly invited and sanctioned the non-participation of his men in a killing action. Are you surprised by this as well? Why do you think Major Trapp allowed this?